Hello there. Hello there.
Hello. So great to see you. I hope you're all doing well. It's been a Thursday, doing stuff, working, all that good stuff. So great to see all of you. Stunt Papa, Stunt Mama, Aronell, Hicks, 13th Age. So good to see you all. It really is. And we'll be right back, burning coats. Yeah, I thought I saw you. I was surprised to see you in here because I'm quite sure I saw you in a voice chat, like playing a game or something. So, but I'm glad you are. So thank you. So let's right out of the gate, let's get our battle going. Okay, because battles are good. Battles are good. There. I think that should be pretty sufficient. Just all huddle in that corner and then we'll see what happens. All right. So, how's everybody doing? Have you had a good week so far? Has it, as long as you choose them wisely. I'm looking forward to getting back into this book. And from what I remember last time, our wolf leader, Farrar, and his siblings were all resting, and they're basically saying, look, we have to go hunt a deer. We have to try and bring that back to our parents because they're starving. And they also discussed how there's a chance that their parents may even have been killed already by Gira, who's kind of like the head pack leader for all the families. So there's these, there's a chance that when they get back, they might be dead anyway. So, but we won't know that until we get into it. And this first chapter is one of the longer ones to start us off with tonight, so it's going to take us a little bit to get through it. Yeah, it's about 40 pages, which for everything in this book, 40 pages is like the longer, of the chapters. And then there are a lot of other ones that are like 6 to 10 pages. So, so that being said, I'm not going to waste any time because I want to get into it. Tonight's a good night to read. It's been a crummy, miserable day outside. Cold, wet. I walked the dog earlier. Sucked. It was raining the whole time. And then when we got back to the house, the dog got in the house before I could get him dried down. So, it's fine. It's fine. It is what it is. All right. That being said, let's get into it, because I'm looking forward to seeing what happens. What kind of dog? It's hard. That's a tough one to answer, actually, because we picked him up from a pound. He's probably a pit hound mix. Something like that. He's very timid, very scared of everything. Literally scared of everything. But he's his happiest when he's on a walk. So, yes, I do have pictures on my Discord. Thank you. And if anyone in here is not part of that Discord, here's another Discord to add to your list of Discords. So there you go. All right. So let's get into this. We got 40 pages to cover. And 26 minutes before the battle starts. So let's see how far we can get. Oh, hold on. I didn't turn on my ceiling fan. Jeez. Rookie move. Gets hot in here. Okay. Our chapter, Farrar, page 171. Are you cold? No, I'm not. I am not cold at all. Here is a link to the book, by the way, if you're planning on following along at any point, or if you want to see what the sequel to this book is all about. Feel free to do so. And here we go. You're cold. Well, I'm very sorry. If I could share some of my heat, I would. But I can't. Here you go. Have some heat. Okay. Farrar woke up as the sky was turning its colors from the clear and blue light of daylight into a mix of red, purple, and orange that brushed the sky in a mix of intertwined colors as the sun started to set over the western plains. For a few moments, he stared at the sky in awe and in complete wonder. He had seen these colors in the sky through the trees, but he had never seen them displayed in such a way across an open and endless blue sky. Farrar wondered what Gaben would have said if he had seen the sky this way. Gaben would always stare at the sky in joyful wonder and with innocent excitement during colorful sunsets. He was always so curious about everything, fascinated by everything he saw, constantly wanting to know every detail about every new discovery from anyone who knew about it. Farrar loved seeing how happy and enthusiastic he became when he discovered new things. It brought Farrar so much joy and entertainment when Gaben did his best to make anyone and everyone hear about the new things that he had recently learned about. Farrar wondered what Gaben and Fela were seeing at this very moment. Was their spirit floating through the sky? Were they a part of the colors? Or did their consciousness cease to exist once they were buried in the ground? Would Farrar get to see them again when he died? Did anyone even know? He suddenly remembered where he was and what he needed to focus on. He got up to stretch his limbs, feeling his body ache all over as he stretched. He was not surprised to see how sore his body had become from such intense physical activity. His head would hurt quite often lately, since his mind was so troubled from his constant concern about his parents' and his siblings' well-being. He looked around and saw Telal and Gebar still sleeping next to each other. Laran, Kea, and Lene were walking towards him from the small rise to the north of the pond. Kea said something to Laran and Lene. They both nodded to her in reply. They all came over to sit next to Farrar. Kea gently licked Telal and Gebar's faces, waking them up in the gentle and comforting way that their mother had always done. Kea, Telal, and Gebar joined Farrar, Lene, and Laran and sat down. Farrar looked at each and every one of them, trying to detect their mood, assessing their mental and emotional condition. They all looked determined and eager to continue on their journey and complete their mission. They all knew that they needed to successfully hunt deer tonight in order to save their parents from slow and painful starvation. Some looked more eager and determined than others, but overall, they all looked focused. Farrar was satisfied to see their determination, so he got straight to the point. We don't know the deer lands, as we don't know what's waiting for us when we reach them. I suggest we go east till we pass where Gira put her scouts, and then sneak into the forest. Once we enter the forest, we head north and east till we see or smell the deer. None of us know what we'll find, so we should devise our plan of attack when we see what we're up against. Once we make our kill, we get out of there and head north. We should circle around Gira's guards as we make our way back home to Mother and Father. Anyone have a better idea? They all looked at him, waiting for him to continue, so he did. I prefer we separate into pairs. Each pair should keep 10 strides apart from the other pair. Laran and Lene, I want you to cover us from the rear. Lene will keep a lookout for anything coming up from behind us, while Laran makes sure that they don't get separated from us. Loran, if she sees anything she wants to tell me about, you can be the messenger. Talal and Gabar, I want the two of you in the middle, one looking to the right while the other one will be looking to the left. Be prepared to support the front or the back of the group if we're attacked. Kea, I want you in the front with me. You might see something that I would miss. Kea looked at him with a smirk on her face. I might? Farrar chuckled, Kea smiling back at him. He knew that Kea had the sharpest eyes among his siblings, except maybe for maybe Lene. In addition, he needed Kea to help him make a plan in case he couldn't come up with a plan of his own. He motioned to the pond. Let's drink before we go. We'll need it. He walked over to the pond and started to drink. The rest of them followed him. When he saw they were all done, he set out a trot. They all fell in behind him in the formation he told them to as they started to make their way east. As they did, the sun was setting behind them. They couldn't see that far ahead. It served them well, since it also meant that they would now be less visible to anyone looking out towards the open plains from the forest. After they covered a distance of 2,000 strides, he turned north. The rest of them followed behind him. He constantly scanned the low hills around them. He kept the pace to an easy and light trot that wouldn't waste their limited and low energy. Every time he reached another hilltop, he scanned the forest that lay ahead. He made sure to keep a watchful eye on the low hills and the open plains that spread out around them, in search of even the slightest hint of movement, or anything that looked like wolves or lions that were waiting to ambush them. When they reached a distance of 1,000 strides from the forest, he slowed down and approached the low hilltop in front of him. Crawling low on his stomach to avoid being seen from the forest or surrounding low hills as much as he could. He looked to the north and saw a good route that would lead him into the forest through little gaps between the low hills of grass that stood between where he was and the first line of trees. He watched for signs of movement from the trees, but he didn't see any. He reminded himself that any wolf or deer that might be watching them from the trees would be well hidden and would not move a hair of their bodies if they were actually there, watching them right now. He moved forward, slowly leading them through the path he saw the gaps in the hills until he reached that low rise before they would enter the forest. He stopped directly behind it, at a point where they would all be hidden from sight to anyone watching from the forest, and he sat down. He waited for them to huddle up close before speaking. Kea and I will go ahead and see what's waiting for us in the forest. When you see one of us come out, the rest of you should come in and join us. They all nodded. He turned around and walked towards the forest, with Kea behind him. He walked slowly, keeping his body low as he moved forward. When they reached the first line of trees, he turned to look at Kea. Done burning goats? That's great to hear. I'm so happy. Go left, he said as quietly as he possibly could. She walked a few strides to the left as they entered the forest together. They quietly moved through the trees, laying their paws down gently and carefully. They kept going for another 50 strides, the two of them constantly looking from side to side to see if they could spot any other animals besides themselves. Farrar stopped in place, lowering himself to the ground. Once Kea did the same, he listened carefully, trying to detect sounds that were not sounds of their own breathing. It was difficult to determine if there was anything or anyone making any kind of sound, considering the fact that all he could hear was the sound of his own heartbeat pounding loudly in his chest. He counted 50 heartbeats. When he didn't hear anything, he turned to Kea. Get the others. I'll wait here and see if there's any movement or sound after you leave. Kea nodded as she went back to get the others. Farrar didn't hear or see any movement while she was gone, but he tried to be as alert as possible anyways. Just because he didn't see or hear anything didn't mean that they were really all alone. When the others joined them, he motioned to Kea to stay behind him as he moved forward, as slowly and as quietly as he could. The rest fell in behind him in single file, keeping the same positions as before. Farrar was walking from tree to tree to avoid being seen. He kept on constantly looking from side to side, trying to see if they were being followed, or if they were being watched. He wasn't sure how many strides they covered since they entered the forest. He looked up to the moon to see how far along into the night they were. He was relieved to see that they were still in the early stages of the night. He slowed down his pace and stopped completely, laying his body low into the ground. He waited for the others to do the same. He listened and watched for signs of any other animals, but there weren't any, so he kept on going. After walking another few hundred strides, he turned to the east. He tried to keep his senses more alert than they were before, if that was even possible. He knew that they were getting closer. He just wasn't sure how much farther they needed to go until they found the deer. He was still nervous about the fact that they had no idea what they were walking into, or what they would do when they found the deer. A variety of different scenarios and possibilities started to pass through his head. What if they found a large group of deer that they could not overwhelm with a coordinated attack? What if they did attack the deer and they all got killed? What if they managed to hunt a deer and got caught and killed by stags? What if they got caught by Gira's guards on their way back? Or what if Gira and her followers followed them to their parents' cave and killed them? What if the stags ambushed them and killed them all before they could even react? More and more bad scenarios were going through Farrar's head, one after another. He tried to stop thinking about all of those bad scenarios, but he couldn't stop them from going through his troubled mind. He stopped moving, laying down on the ground, desperately trying to relax his frantic mind. He wasn't as nervous or as afraid as this when they were hunting the boars. He wondered if it might be because he didn't see anything around him for more than a few dozen strides in any direction in the dark and silent forest. When they hunted the boar, the plains were open. Everything was visible to them. And I just lost my place. He looked back at the others, realizing that they all looked nervous too. Kea walked up to him, softly brushed her cheek against his. "Don't be afraid, Farrar. You are the bravest one among us. If you let your fear control you now, what will happen to the rest of us? How can we have courage tonight if you don't?" Farrar tried to think of a way to explain his fears to her, but all he could say was, "What if we fail, Kea? What if one or all of us get killed? What if? What if? And what if we had stayed in the cave with Mother and Father? What if you wouldn't have had the courage to rebel against Gira? What if we didn't follow you? What if we would have failed to find the boars? What if some or all of us would have been killed trying to hunt the boars? Those fears didn't hold you back before. Don't let these new fears hold you back now. We will follow you wherever you choose to lead us, Farrar. Therefore, you must show us how much courage and confidence you have, so that we can be inspired and influenced by it. You must find your balance again, Farrar. We need it more than you do, because we are all relying on you." No pressure. Her words slowly calmed him down. He realized how right she was. He looked back at the others and saw them all looking at him, waiting for him to lead them, which made him realize just how much they needed him to be confident and brave in front of them, even if he didn't feel like it at all. Farrar breathed slowly, inhaling deeply, holding his breath before exhaling slowly. He did it again, then again, and again until he was in control of his mind, until his fears were shoved into the back of his mind. His focus was once again on leading them all on this hunt, and bringing them all back alive and well, with plenty of meat for their parents. Taking deep breaths made him realize that there was an unfamiliar scent in the air. Farrar? Kea asked gently. He noticed a scent that he had never smelled before. It was a very distinguishable odor. He didn't know what it was. He turned his head left and right, smelling the air around him, trying to determine where it was coming from. Farrar? Kea asked a second time, with a worried look on her face. Can you smell that, Kea? There's a scent in the air that I've never smelled before. She looked at him for a moment, then she sniffed the air a few times. I'm not sure, Farrar. Maybe. But how does that help us right now? Even if we do track the smell and it is the deer, we may walk into a trap that we can't fight our way out of. Farrar got up. He walked over to Talal and Gebar, who were sitting next to each other. Do you smell something different in the air? They both sniffed the air a couple of times, then they both shook their heads left and right to indicate they didn't. Farrar walked back towards Kea, walking east to see if the scent was getting stronger. After walking 20 strides, he could still smell it, but he couldn't tell if it was getting stronger or not. He motioned for Kea and the rest to follow him as he led them east, trying to locate the origin of the new and unfamiliar scent. After covering about 200 strides, the unknown scent was getting a little stronger. Kea walked up to him, sniffed loudly into his ear to let him know that she could smell the unknown scent. That was when he noticed that there was a small clearing 100 strides to the southeast. He immediately stopped, lowering his body to the ground. Then the rest of them followed his lead, lowering themselves to the ground. He looked from side to side in every direction, trying to see if he could spot any other animals besides themselves. Slowly, he got up and walked over to Kea. Stay here. I want to get a good look at the clearing and its surroundings, he whispered. Kea nodded to him. He turned around, starting to make his way towards the clearing as slowly and as quietly as he could. His heart was racing as he took one step forward, then another, constantly looking from side to side to see if there was any sign of movement up ahead. When he was only 50 strides from the clearing, he noticed that there were figures lying on the ground inside the small clearing. He was also able to see the size of the clearing was roughly 30 strides wide and about 20 strides long. He lowered his back a little more as he kept on moving, even slower than he did before. He did not want to be heard or seen by the figures in the clearing. Even if they did not hear him, he didn't want his motion to attract any attention. Crack. Farrar froze. He did not move a muscle. He could barely breathe. Under his paw, he felt a small branch that he didn't notice as he stepped on it. After a few moments went by, he slowly lowered his whole body to the ground as he kept his eyes focused straight ahead on the clearing. Even though the sound of the branch breaking might not have been heard by the figures in the clearing, it seemed as loud as an entire pack of wolves howling at the top of their lungs in Farrar's ears. He didn't see any movement from the clearing, or from anywhere else either. Neither did he hear anything except for his own heart pounding like thunder. The sound of his heart beating was so loud in his head that he was surprised that he did not wake up the whole forest. Suddenly, he heard noises from up ahead, from within the clearing itself. It sounded like a conversation was taking place within the clearing, but he could not hear the words that were being spoken. Everything slowed down in Farrar's mind as he tried to decide if he should get up and run away or stay where he was, hoping that he would not be seen. Suddenly, 2 large stags emerged from within the clearing, making him decide to stay where he was, hoping they wouldn't notice him. Farrar was amazed at the sight of their large and magnificent antlers. He was also in awe of how they stood up, so tall, proud, and elegant. They walked with a grace that was so impressive to watch, even for a wolf that wanted to kill them to eat the flesh off their bones. The 2 stags stopped after taking a few steps beyond the edge of the clearing. Both of them looked left and right. They stood still, not moving at all for a few moments. For Farrar, those moments seemed as long as an entire day. It looked like they were speaking to each other. He realized that they were probably whispering. Their mouths were moving, but Farrar could not hear what they were saying. Then one of them motioned with his head to the other one. They both... Hold on. We'll need to drop out here in a couple minutes. Family duties. Everyone have a great Friday. Thank you, Hicks. Say hi to the fam, and I hope you enjoy your evening. Thank you for coming. They both turned around and walked back into the clearing, disappearing from sight. Farrar wasn't sure what to do next. He knew that they needed to hunt deer, but he wasn't sure if it was too risky, now that the stags might be suspicious of their presence. Excuse me. It might be better to look for another clearing that could be taken by surprise. He decided to get a closer look anyway, hoping that it would help him make the right decision. Farrar got up, walking forward slowly, trying to be more careful than he was before. He laid each paw down even more gently and slowly. He turned right, in order to get a good view of the clearing's surroundings, in order to see which direction was the best one to attack from. He stopped 20 strides from the western edge of the clearing. Suddenly, the two stags he saw earlier walked out of the clearing from the same side that they came out of before, headed northwest. Farrar lowered himself to the ground as fast as he could without making any noise. The two stags looked more alert this time. They started to make their way farther out of the clearing than they had the first time. They covered 10 strides, then 20. They kept on going, step by step. They were getting closer to where Kea was positioned. Farrar couldn't make out exactly where she was, but he knew that they would soon reach her. One of the stags motioned to the other with his head. They spread out to either side as they kept on walking, slowly, sniffing the air, constantly looking from side to side. The one who turned to the left suddenly stopped after a few steps. He raised his head, looking from side to side quickly as he sniffed the air again and again. Kea vaulted from her position, only 10 strides away from him, leaping onto his neck. The stag yelled in pain and tried to shake her off, while the second stag ran over to help him. Farrar, who was almost 100 strides away, ran towards them as fast as he could, hoping that Kea could hold on until he arrived. Talal and Gebar rose to their feet and charged at the stag that was running towards Kea, both of them biting and snarling as they engaged with him. Laran and Lene were running towards Kea from behind Talal and Gebar. Kea was thrown to the ground by the stag's frantic movements. She rolled on the ground as she landed. She lunged at him again, leaping into the air, aiming for his head. The stag ran towards Kea, lowering his head. She flew into his antlers as she kept on running, headed towards a tree that was only a few strides away. The stag crashed into the tree, impaling Kea with his long and sharp antlers. Kea yelled out in pain as the antlers went through her. Lene and Laran attacked the stag from behind, each of them attacking from a different side. Farrar was only 50 strides away, trying to run even faster as he saw everything play out in front of his eyes. The stag fighting with Kea threw his head to the right. Kea went flying into the air. Laran and Lene tried to bring him down by biting him in the stomach and on his legs. The stag turned around, running away from them, headed straight towards Farrar. The stag immediately noticed that Farrar was right in front of him, only 15 strides away. He lowered his antlers. Farrar ducked to the left, barely able to avoid the stag's antlers as he ran by. He pivoted to the right, lunging for the stag's right back leg. Farrar bit down hard on the stag's right back leg when he felt the stag's leg in his jaw. He used the momentum he had gathered to drag the stag back as his body kept moving forward. The stag lost his balance and fell to the ground. As the stag fell, Laran and Lene charged in, biting his neck, ripping it open as the stag tried to shake them off, but he wasn't able to. Farrar rose to his feet. As he turned around, he saw Talal and Gebar still fighting the other stag. The stag had his back to a wide tree. His antlers were moving left and right as Talal and Gebar were trying to penetrate his defensive stance. Talal was on the stag's right side, while Gebar was on his left. Talal tried to attack the stag from the right. When the stag tried to intercept him, Talal circled to the left and joined Gebar as they both tried to attack the stag from the left side. When they did, the stag charged at them, moving his antlers from side to side so fast and with such ferocity that both Talal and Gebar had to move back in order to avoid getting hit by his antlers. When they moved back from him, the stag turned around, running back towards the clearing. Talal and Gebar ran after him, trying to bite at his legs. "Stop, Talal, stop!" After taking a few more steps, they did. Loud noises of panic could be heard in the clearings as the stag ran into it. Talal and Gebar ran over to join him. Farrar suddenly remembered Kea. He turned around to find Laran and Lene standing beside her. Kea's body lay still on the ground. Farrar started walking towards her. He could immediately feel his paws growing heavier and heavier with every slow step that he took. He forced himself to keep moving forward, one paw after the other. When he reached Kea, he knew she was dead, but the sight of her limp body still surprised him, instantly making his heart grow heavier than it had ever before. Laran and Lene were staring at Farrar, waiting for him to say something or do something. Farrar was lost for words. His mind became completely numb as he stared at Kea's face, unable to digest the fact that she was gone, and gone for good. The sounds of deer shouting and running could be heard everywhere. Farrar couldn't see all of the movements or hear all of the noise that was being made, but he could still feel that the deer were waking up all over this section of the forest. Talal and Gebar joined them. "We need to go now," Talal said. Farrar knew that he was right. They needed to leave immediately. "Quick, let's each tear parts of the meat from the dead stag over there to take home for Mother and Father," Talal said. The deer in this section of the forest were calling out to the others. Their calls sounded like loud screeching sounds, gradually getting louder as more deer took up the call. The sound of a large group of deer could be heard approaching from the east. Farrar couldn't tell how many of them there were, or how far away they were either. All he could hear was the sound of a large number of hooves pounding the earth. The sound of the large group approaching grew louder and louder. "We need to go now, now," Talal said urgently. He bit his jaws into the dead stag's body, tearing a large part of the flesh out of it. Following Talal's example, Gebar and Farrar did the same. Lene and Laran were able to recover from their shock of Kea's death to do the same as well. Farrar looked at Kea one last time, surprised to see how peaceful she looked. She lay there in peace as he looked at her face, but he couldn't ignore the parts of her fur that were covered in blood from the wounds that she had suffered from those long and sharp antlers. Knowing he would never see her again, he said farewell to her in her heart. Loud hooves pounding the earth could be heard approaching from behind the clearing. Farrar turned north and ran, the rest of them following right behind in a single file. They were right in the middle of the deer's part of the forest. They needed to get out of it fast if they wanted to stay alive. He didn't care about stealth. The deer already knew that they were here. He only cared about getting everyone out of here as fast as they possibly could. He hated to admit that he also wanted to get away from Kea's body, to put as much distance as he could between himself and what her death meant for him and for his family. He did not want to think about how it was his fault that she was dead. If he had not stepped on the branch, the stags would not have never come out of the clearing. If he had not come out of the clearing, Kea would have never had to fight the stag all alone. Farrar pushed the thought out of his mind. He needed to focus on getting himself and the others out of here. Every 100 strides, he looked back to see if the siblings were still behind him. They were, so he kept on running north at a pace that they could all see where he ran to keep up with him. He kept on running north, for at least 2,000 strides before slowing down to a complete stop. The loud screech sounds to the south could barely be heard anymore, but that was mostly because of how quiet the forest was at night. Farrar was relieved that he didn't hear the sound of hooves approaching from the south. He quickly reminded himself that just because they couldn't hear them approaching didn't mean that there weren't any stags out there with the intent of catching up with them. He turned northwest and started to run again. He didn't want to take the chance of letting the stags catch up, especially not after he saw how dangerous an encounter with them could be. After covering at least another 1,000 strides, he slowed down, then stopped completely. He listened to the sound of the forest. He didn't hear anything besides his siblings catching up to him, panting heavily. They looked as if it wasn't easy for them to keep up with him at this pace. He waited to see that they were all behind him. Then he turned west and kept on going at a slow trot. Farrar kept this pace till they covered a few hundred strides. He stopped and turned around to face the others. They all gathered around him. He laid down his piece of meat. They all did the same. He looked at the meat that they had all collected. It was roughly half of the weight of meat that you would find on a healthy, full-grown wolf. It would save their mother and father from starvation, but that was all that it would do. The fat reserves and the muscle mass that would have been lost over the winter will take time and lots of meat to be rebuilt. We need to reach mother and father tonight. They need it soon, or they will starve to death. They all knew it. One by one, they all nodded in agreement. Loran looked confused and disoriented, constantly looking from side to side. Lene stepped up to Loran and gently started licking his face. Loran looked at her as if he did not recognize her at all. He slowly sat down on the ground and started to cry hysterically. It made Farrar uncomfortable to see that Loran was publicly crying in a way that demonstrated how much emotional pain he was in, and how much it grieved him to lose Kea. Farrar had already pushed the thought of Kea's death all the way into the farthest place in the back of his mind. He had also buried the pain of losing her into the deepest part of his heart, a place where neither he nor anyone else would ever need to confront it. Just as he had pushed away the pain and the grief of losing Fela and Giben, he didn't have the time nor the energy to cope with their loss on a mental or an emotional level. But the real reason he didn't cope with it was because he simply didn't want to accept it. Not facing and not confronting it allowed him to keep on living his life as if it never happened. He kept telling himself that he had to focus on other matters, more pressing matters, such as focusing on hunting to provide meat to save his siblings and his parents. Farrar thought about what would have happened if they didn't go hunting deer tonight, which would have meant that they would have abandoned their parents to death by starvation within a few days from now. The truth of the matter was that none of them had seriously considered the fact that they would be killed by the animals that they were hunting. On that note, I'm going to pause. I'm going to start our Stream Raiders battle. And then I'll keep reading. I'm just going to do it off screen here real quick. And then I'll start a new one here shortly. They did take caution not to get hurt, but none of them had really considered such an outcome. It was Gira and her followers that they were really afraid of. It turned out that they were not cautious enough of their prey's fighting skills. Kea's death removed their confidence, replacing it with strong senses of fear and of loss. Farrar was now truly afraid of all of the perils that lay in front of them. Suddenly, Farrar was surprised to realize that they were all sitting on the ground. He was even more surprised when he felt tears running down his cheeks. Even though he was surprised to discover the tears on his face, he didn't try to hold them back. He just didn't have the energy to hold them back any longer. He wanted to let it all out. He just couldn't keep everything held up inside anymore. And we won that battle, of course, because you guys are awesome. 13th and Substitute Creature both getting scrolls, so good job. And I will start our next battle real quick. And there you go. Battle's ready. Have at it. He cried for Kea, and for Fella, and for Gaben. He cried as he let go of his feelings of guilt for not being able to save them. He cried out with the pain of his feelings of personal failure. He cried for reasons he was not completely sure he understood. He cried for things that he would never be able to express in a way that anyone else would ever be able to understand. He let it all out, relieved to feel both lighter and in less pain than he had felt before. He felt a weight drop from his shoulders. The tension that he had felt for so long started to loosen up from his sore muscles, his troubled mind, and eventually even from his aching heart. He rose to his feet, looking up at the sky. He started to howl. He howled in a loud and clear voice for all to hear. He was finally letting himself express the pain and the grief that was eating him up inside. After Farrar let out a loud and long howl, Loran got up and started to howl as well. The sound of both of them howling together at the same time echoed through the still and quiet forest. One by one, Gebar, Tilal, and Lene joined in, howling together, howling as one. Their howls were loud and strong. Their howls were full of pain, full of sadness, full of sorrow, and full of grief. As they all howled together, each one of them expressed their deepest emotions and feelings. It was a sound that was too raw in its form to be expressed with words. As they let out the true sound of their inner voice, a union began to take form between them. Kea's death was harder for all of them than Fella and Gaben's death were. Fella and Gaben's death did not come as a surprise to any of them. None of them thought that more of them would die after Fella and Gaben died. The bitter consequences of a life of hunting to survive had finally caught up with them. To kill or to be killed, that was the life of a predator. To kill so you could feed yourself and your family, or fail to kill and starve to death along with your entire family. That was the only way of life that any wolf has ever known. There was a hidden sound that could be heard as they all howled together, a sound that could only be heard by those that were howling with an open and bruised heart. They have all drifted apart since Fella and Gaben had died. Tilal and Gebar became closer with each other. Lene and Loran found the comfort of each other's company because no one else was around. Kea and Farrar, on the other hand, became the loners of the family, as they always have been, each one of them trying to find their own path on their own, seeking internal strength and emotional support from spending time by themselves instead of leaning on others when they felt weak. Kea and Farrar found the strength from within. As they did so, they found the power of greater independence and resolve when facing stress, anxiety, and fear. Farrar believed that it was what made him and Kea understand each other a lot better than the others did. And it was why Kea was his closest sibling. She knew what it was like to be a lone wolf, just like he was. They shared a bond that existed between those who did not rely on the support and the comfort that was provided by others to help them handle life's difficult struggles. Farrar and Kea struggled alone because they chose to be alone with their pain. They did not speak about the pain with others, nor did they share their feelings about it, because they wanted that part of themselves to remain hidden. Farrar knew that some would think that this was a form of weakness, but they couldn't deny the fact that it built strength and endurance, the kind of strength that leaders were required to possess. Looking at the others, he saw in their eyes that they were all lacking in that kind of strength, because they all looked to him, hoping that he would comfort them and help them find their way. They needed him to help them find that comfort, because they haven't acquired the necessary knowledge about themselves that facing your pain all alone enabled you to have. There was an unspoken bond that had just been made between all of them. Farrar couldn't describe it in words, but looking at each of his remaining siblings, he could tell that they all felt it too. Farrar felt a warm feeling radiate inside of him that was coming from the place in his heart where he carried the love that he'd felt for his brothers, sisters, and parents. It was a warm feeling they had not felt for quite some time now. Farrar stepped over to Loran and embraced him. Lene joined in. Talal and Gabar joined in as well, hugging Loran from all sides. They stood there, in the middle of the forest, in complete darkness, and hugged each other. Farrar stood there, surrounded by his siblings, and breathed in the scent of each and every one of them. As he did, he felt their body warmth and his own become one. At that very moment, he felt like they were no longer separate bodies anymore. He felt that they were all part of one body, one mind, one heart, and one spirit. As they stood there hugging each other, they were concluding the emotional and the mental experience of connecting to each other they had all just went through. "Gabar, move back, I can barely breathe," Loran said. They all stepped back from each other. One by one, they all started to laugh. It started as a low and light laugh, and it slowly intensified into a loose and free laugh where they all let go completely, laughing hysterically. It was a release that they all needed. Farrar enjoyed every second of it. Loran lifted the piece of meat he was carrying from the ground. Farrar lifted his piece of meat too. Then they all did. He looked up at the sky, which was far brighter now, as the dawn was drawing nearer. They needed to hurry up and reach their family's cave before the sun rose. The others saw him staring up at the sky, and they looked up too, noticing what Farrar did. He motioned to the others to follow as he set the pace to a fast trot as he headed west. When he saw that they were all moving behind him in a single file, he increased his pace to a slow run. He kept the same pace as they kept moving southwest. He slowed down when he realized that they were not so far from their home. Their family cave was only a little more than 1,000 strides to the southwest. He stopped and sat down. The others came over to speak with him, sitting down when they reached him. They all put their pieces of meat down from their mouths, waiting for him to speak. "We're close. It's more than possible that someone has heard our howls. Don't forget that Gear's scouts are out there. Stay close to each other and keep low. Try to be as quiet as you can. If we're attacked by Gear's followers, stand your ground and fight back. We will come to your aid, if and when we can. Stay alert. Chances are they're already waiting for us." Farrar looked at them each in turn, measuring the look in their eyes, and the way they held themselves when he stared them in the eyes. Yeah, I don't have any quotes. Sorry. Except for Loran, they all looked ready to fight for their lives right here and right now. I know, shocking. Loran looked a little less connected. Wait, sorry. Oh, yeah, no, I was right. Loran looked a little less connected to the here and now, but Farrar knew that if he needed Loran to fight with them, then Loran would fight, and he would fight well. Farrar turned and looked towards the southwest, not seeing any movement from that direction. But that didn't mean that there weren't any scouts watching them this very moment. He knew very well that there could be an ambush waiting for them somewhere between here and their family's cave, or maybe even at the cave itself. Farrar suddenly realized that if he was a scout, he might have been hiding on a tree instead of on the ground. The taller branches provided a good vantage point, concealment, and if necessary, even a good defensive position. He turned to Gabar and Talal. "There might be scouts on the trees. Keep an eye out for them, but don't forget to scan the ground as well." They both nodded to him. He turned back and walked towards their home. The sky was beginning to become a little lighter as the dawn was getting nearer. That was when Farrar realized that this was a perfect opportunity for them to move through the caves unnoticed. He increased their pace to a quick trot. They were all looking from side to side, expecting Gear's followers to jump out from an ambush and attack them at any moment. Farrar was somewhat surprised to see that no one attacked them or challenged them as quickly and as silently as they moved through the caves. He was still worried about being spotted from the trees or by a scout that was hiding in a good position that they didn't notice. It would be safe to assume that they were seen, which meant that they would need to leave soon, maybe even right away. When they finally spotted their family's cave, Farrar stopped at a spot where they were all still hidden by the trees and the low bushes surrounding them to anyone who was looking at their direction from the cave. He wanted to scan the area around the cave for a potential ambush before moving forward. The cave stood in the middle of a wide clearing with a few dozen trees standing above it. Between two of the trees, there was an entrance that was about 4 strides wide. You could easily miss it if you didn't know it was there. He took a few moments to look. He took a few moments to look and see if there were any signs of movement. Farrar didn't see any movement, but he did notice that the sky was getting brighter. He dropped his piece of meat and turned around to speak to the others. "Lene, go and see if they're there. The rest of you, see if anyone is coming from behind us. Stay close to me so we're not too far apart in case we're ambushed." They all nodded. Lene started moving forward. The others positioned themselves next to Farrar, blending into the bushes. Farrar crawled on the ground to where he would be able to see Lene's path to the cave. He watched Lene get closer to the cave, her ears standing up, her body tense, trying to look in every direction at the same time. There was movement from the cave's entrance, and Lene froze. Farrar rose from the ground, ready to run to Lene's aid. Their father walked out and stood at the entrance of the cave, facing Lene. He didn't move towards her, he just stood there, waiting patiently. His brownish-gray fur hung to frail bones, which were once heavily muscled. Farrar got up, making himself visible to his father. His father scanned the area behind him, trying to see if anyone else was with them. Farrar turned and called the others. They walked over to stand next to him, so that their father could see them too. His father looked at them as if he was looking for something he wasn't able to find. Farrar realized that he was looking for Kea. Farrar felt his knees shake as his father locked eyes with him. Farrar turned his head slowly from side to side, letting his father know that Kea was not with them. His father's gaze did not change. It remained unwavering, strong, and determined. Farrar forgot how strong and how steady his father was. His father was like an old tree that constantly remained rooted to the ground, no matter how strong the winds blew or how heavy the snows fell. Even when he found out that another one of his children was dead, he remained strong and steady, not letting his emotions show in the slightest way. Loran ran to their father. After a few moments, Talal and Gabar ran to him as well. Loran was weeping by the time he reached their father, and immediately embraced him. Their father was embracing Loran in return, stroking Loran's head and shoulders with his neck, speaking to him softly in an attempt to comfort him. One day when I were watching, woohoo! It always amazed Farrar how his father could be as soft as a freshly fallen snowflake to certain brothers and sisters of his, while being as hard as an old tree stump towards Farrar. With Farrar, he was always unforgiving, cold, tough, hard, and angry, constantly demanding more and more from him. His father did not behave that way with any of his other offspring. Farrar knew that this was another one of the differences between himself and the others that shaped him into becoming the leader that he was now gradually being. The kind of leader that this family, and maybe even the whole pack, now needed. But most importantly, it was one of the things that made him into the kind of wolf and the kind of leader that he had always wanted to eventually become. Farrar suddenly realized that he was standing there all alone. He realized that Lene and Loran were already inside the cave, which was a good thing. The sooner his mother ate, the better it was for everyone. Gebar and Talal were speaking to their father at the cave's entrance. Farrar started walking forward slowly, every step slowly becoming harder and harder as his legs grew heavier and heavier with every step he took. He felt like he was marching through deep snows, while at the same time it felt like he was crossing a deep stream with a strong current that was trying to drag him away. He needed to push his legs forward through an unseen force that was holding him back. That was when he realized that he was looking down at the ground. He slowly forced himself to look up. He needed to face his father with his head held high. He looked up to see his father standing only a few strides away from him, waiting there, all alone. Farrar forced himself to look at his father's eyes as he walked up to meet him. His father looked him in the eyes as he stepped forward. When Farrar reached the entrance of the cave, his father sat down on the ground. Farrar sat down next to him. His father's eyes became softer, more gentle, but his face didn't lose the tough and hard features that his father's face had always possessed, even when he was in a good mood. Farrar laid down his piece of meat. "Please, father, eat this. I know you won't touch any of the meat already inside in order to save it for Mother, but if you don't eat, you will eventually starve. If you want to take care of Mother in the future, you need to eat. Don't deny the truth of it. Please, for once, don't argue with me. Just eat the meat. You need it. And we all need to know that you ate a small portion of what we brought back." His father laughed softly. He took a deep breath, settled down, and started eating. Farrar let out a deep sigh of relief. He couldn't help but realize that this meant his father truly was starving. As his father ate, Farrar tried to listen to what was going on in the cave. He didn't hear any sobbing, which meant two things. The first was his mother was alive and probably eating, or at least he hoped so. The second was that no one had told her of Kaya's death. When their mother found out, she would be heartbroken beyond measure. Kaya was the most similar to their mother in terms of personality, which for some reason didn't stop them from always butting heads with each other. In the same way that Farrar always butts heads with their father, regardless of their similarities. Maybe the real reason that both Farrar and Kaya had always butted heads with the parents they resembled the most was because of how similar they were to that parent. Every one of their faults probably reminded the parent that they resembled of their own faults. Farrar wondered why the ones who were the loners were always the ones who rebelled the most and confronted their parents the most as well. When his father was done eating, he looked up again to meet Farrar's eyes. "I never thought I'd live to eat deer again once Gira stopped giving permission to hunt the deer and when she wasn't leading the hunt herself. At first, I was surprised when she wouldn't let me lead hunts anymore. I thought it was because she wanted to show her superiority over me and to extinguish any potential thoughts I might have about challenging her leadership. As time went by, she continued to deny everyone's request to hunt deer. I slowly became suspicious of the actual reason behind her actions. Eventually, I started to feel betrayed, and even angry. After all, I was the one who taught Gira how to hunt deer when she was just a young she-wolf wanting to learn how it was done. Looking back at how things turned out, I regret not killing her when I still had the chance. I had no way of knowing what a monster she would become. The smarter and the stronger she became, the more ambitious and vicious she became too. As she grew more influential, she became more cunning, more cruel, and more ruthless towards the other wolves in the pack, especially the weak ones, who couldn't protect themselves from her and her cronies. Farrar was shocked to hear his father speak so openly to him. His father noticed the surprised look on his face. He smiled before continuing. After I taught Gira how to hunt, I figured she would try to teach the others she wanted to learn too. After all, hunters passed on what they know to others for as long as the pack has been in existence. Maybe even as long as wolf packs has existed. That's how I learned, which is why she was able to learn too. But she taught only a few who followed her with an unquestionable loyalty. She only taught those that she could easily control. Many wolves started to speak out against her and her followers. But the way I saw it, any wolf would choose who to teach to hunt, as long as they do teach and keep the cycle of knowledge in motion. There was never any law against certain wolves becoming a hunting party, and always hunted together and taught those who joined them. The problem was, they never distributed any of the meat they hunted among the pack. The pack leader at the time was too weak to do anything, since he had so few loyal followers. Gira, on the other hand, drew more and more followers to her circle after every successful hunt. There was no organized leadership back then. Everyone just did what they wanted. I actually enjoyed the fact that I could do what I want without anyone interfering or telling me what to do or not to do. After all, I was a full-grown wolf who could hunt, kill, and do everything a grown wolf needed to do. Most of the hunting parties shared their meat with the others, as I always did. But when some hunting parties didn't, nothing was done about it. Since I was considered such a strong and capable hunting leader at the time, many looked at me to put an end to Gira's growing strength and influence, which she mainly gained through intimidation and fear. When Gira found out what wolves in the pack were trying to get me to challenge her, she came to me one day. She offered that we lead the pack together, that we become mates and start a family. I told her that I could never love such a cold-hearted and cruel wolf, let alone raise cubs with one. A mother needs to be soft, compassionate, and devoted to her cubs, attributes that Gira lacked completely. She wanted to kill me when I told her that. I think she have thought that she could beat me in an actual fight, but she didn't stand a chance against me if we ever did face one another. Not a single wolf in the pack did at that time. Within a few days, one by one, every jealous, cruel, angry, and mean wolf in the pack who hadn't joined her yet was recruited by her personally. She recruited every wolf in the pack who felt that he or she were being mistreated by the others. She promised them a belly full of meat for the rest of their lives. But the most important promise that she gave them was that they would have power and control over those who had mistreated them throughout their lives. No one ever knew that there were so many weak and cruel wolves in the pack. But somehow, Gira formed them into one large group of loyal followers. Before anyone could do anything to stop them, they killed the pack leader and all of his loyal followers. There was nothing anyone could do to stop them after that. Your mother and I were going to leave the pack with a few of the other families who were not part of Gira's group of cronies. But then, your mother got pregnant. I didn't want to risk leaving the cave before we had another shelter ready for us to take in throughout the winter, and so we stayed. The families who were going to leave with us stayed too. I hope they don't blame us for it, but if they do, then I can easily understand why. I don't blame them. His father swept his gaze around the trees that surrounded the family cave, looking to see if there were any signs of movement. When he saw none, he looked back at Farrar. "Do you know why I'm telling you all of this, Farrar?" his father asked in a serious and cold tone. Farrar was thinking about what to say in response, but his father continued before he could even answer. "Gira is smart and unexpected, but you will need to defeat her nonetheless. You will be the leader of the rebellion. If you lose, the pack will die. Not a physical death, but a death of the spirit that once connected the wolves in the pack. There used to be compassion. Wolves used to care for one another. There was once a sense of companionship between families. Gira killed that. Same way she is slowly killing every family who doesn't join her. She's slowly starving to death them to death one by one. You didn't rebel against me when you went hunting. You rebelled against Gira, as I should have a long time ago. But it seems that rebellions and wars are destined for young wolves. They are not for old wolves like me. I feel that my spirit has slowly died inside of me ever since Gira has been ruling the pack. There's no longer a wild spirit raging within me, as there once was. Rebellions need to be led by wolves with a wild spirit running through their heart. Rebellions need leaders with passion, with a strong will to stand up and fight against overwhelming odds, to fight for what is true, to fight for justice, to never give up, no matter how hopeless the situation may seem. That is why you, Farrar, are the perfect wolf to lead this rebellion. The other wolf families who have not yet submitted themselves to Gira feel the same way as I do about it. After you left, I spoke with all of them, at least with those who are left. They know that only hope for their sons and their daughters' future lies in a rebellion. In your rebellion, which you have already started. But you must leave here immediately, even though you have only just returned. Go now. Gather the wolves who will follow you. I explained to Gebar and Talal which families to go to, and in which order. Gira's scouts have surely spotted you on your return, so you don't have much time. His father got up with a smile on his face as he gently rubbed his face against Farrar's. He held his breath as his father rubbed his cheek against his own. His father had not done that since Farrar was a cub, too young to leave the cave without one of his parents there to watch over him. His father took a step back, looking at him with such a soft look in his eyes, that it made it hard for Farrar to look back into such a soft look coming from his very own father, who had been so hard on him for so long. Besides the surprising and unfamiliar look in his father's eyes, what made it so hard for Farrar to meet his father's eyes was the fact that he knew that it was the last time that they would ever see each other. Farrar has been waiting for his father to soften up to him since he was a cub. And now that his father finally did, Farrar didn't know what to say in response to it, or how to react. He was just frozen, both in his mind and in his body. His father laughed softly, looking at him with a soft and understanding look. I would have followed you, Farrar, if your mother wasn't as weak as she was. She can't travel far in her condition. I won't leave her behind. Gira will most certainly torture her to death, but even if she didn't, I simply don't want to leave her side for the rest of my life, nor do I want to leave this cave. This is the cave where I grew up, where my father and his father before him grew up as well. This is where I lived my whole life. The cave that your mother and I have lived in when we first became mates. This is where I opened up my heart to her, unfolding the rough and tough layers of a hunter and warrior that has made himself as hard as he can possibly become. A warrior who has prevented himself from being soft in any way so that he will be strong as he could ever be. But your mother found my soft spots. She opened them up regardless of how much I resisted her attempts. She is the only one who I have ever shown the gentle side of my heart to. I had forgotten that it ever existed until I met her. It was hard for me at first, but it became easier over time. If she will end up starving to death, then I want to keep her company as she does, to comfort her when she is in pain, whatever the cost. I am hers and she is mine, till the very end, which will be very soon. Gear will be coming for you, which is why you need to go. Go south, hunt the horses and the bison, gather hunting experience, gain courage. When you're ready, come back and challenge Gira. But mind you, it might not be time for a few years, and you might even find a better place to build a home for those who follow you. In which case, stay there, raise families, live a wild and free life, the way a wolf always should. This part of the forest is not worth dying for, The open plains are wild and beautiful. There are more prey animals than just deer. Always remember, Farrar, that your rebellion is not a fight for the caves our ancestors have built in the forest a long time ago. It is a fight against tyranny and against oppression. Don't you ever forget that. Be prepared to find a new home with those who will follow you if the opportunity presents itself. You are fighting for your freedom, not for the caves. You must remember that. You must. Farrar was confused as his father finished speaking. His father laughed, took a step closer, and gently rubbed his nose against Farrar's. Every wolf dies, my dear and wonderful brave son. Some of those who will follow you will die during the rebellion. They know the risks of rebelling just the same as you do. Accept their sacrifice. Let go of the heavy and uncomfortable burden of their deaths being your fault. If it weren't for your rebellion, then there wouldn't be any hope for the Pack's future. Focus on that, or the weight and the burden of their deaths will weigh so heavy on your shoulders that it will drown you in feelings of guilt and of regret. It will be hard and confusing. You will want to give up more than once, but remember, during those moments, how you stood up and fought for your independence when others simply submitted to oppression out of fear, cowardice, and weakness. Remember how you led those who could not act of their own without you leading them in that direction. Remember that you know that you are capable of accomplishing when doubts fill you during the darkest moments. These will be dark moments where you won't be able to imagine that anything good will ever happen to you again. Always remember the sun, for it rises and shines bright after the darkest part of the night. It happens gradually, so have patience when you find yourself lost in that darkness. The sun will always rise from the darkest and the most terrible night, if you just hold on, and resist the terrible despair that tries to paralyze you and prevent you from prevailing, despite the difficulties and the obstacles that lay in front of you. Farrar embraced his father. He just stood there for what seemed like a long time, holding his father close to him. He was embracing his father with his heart, his body, and his broken spirit. After a few moments, his father stepped back, nodding to him. Tilal, Gebar, Lene, Laran, come here now. His father didn't say it loudly, but it carried a weight that could be felt in every part of the cave. Within a few moments, Tilal, Gebar, Laran, and Lene appeared from the cave. Go now, please. Every moment you wait is an unnecessary risk. Go, now. Farrar motioned with his head to the others. He turned around, trotting towards the trees as the others followed him. After about 30 strides, he turned around and looked back. He looked at his father in a way that he had wanted to ever since he was a cub. His heavy heart felt warmer and lighter than it had ever felt before. His father nodded to him with a warm smile. Farrar nodded back with a smile of his own, and as he turned around and trotted into the trees to join the others. Farrar's heart was full of pride and a sense of accomplishment. After all this time, when Farrar clashed with his father over everything and anything, the feelings of his father's blessing and admiration filled Farrar's heart with so much joy it felt like it was going to burst. He felt his father's pride, and how much his father believed in him, fill his heart with warmth. He was thrilled to find out how much his father believed that he could lead the others to defeat Gira. Those things meant so much to Farrar, maybe even more so because of how much conflict he and his father had had in the past. Farrar had always tried to get his father's approval. Now that he finally had it, it felt really good. But he was still afraid. He was still uncertain, unsure of whether he had what it takes to lead the rebellion to victory. And that was a very long chapter. My goodness. Whew. I need a drink. Wow. Okay. So there we have it. A story of death, victory, and a whole bunch of other stuff. All mixed in. Oh, wow. Alright. Let's do our Stream Raiders. Yeah, it was a good chapter. It was, had a lot of emotion built in, that's for sure. Alright, everybody. Here we go. 20 allies. Good luck. Archers and artillery doing a fantastic job. And just like that, it's all over. Good job, everybody. Aranel gets the gold. Way to go. I got some candy. Which, by the way, for the past 2 days, I have avoided excess sugar, and I am dying inside because I want all the sugar. Okay? I want all the sugar, and I'm doing my best to not eat any of it. And it sucks. Okay. We love archers on this map. Oh, yes, we do. Put as many archers as you possibly can. And then let's get some tanks. And then, of course, whatever else you want to put. It's all gravy. Alright, there we go. Love it. So yeah, our next chapter is only like 3 pages. So there you go. That's the difference that sometimes happens with these kinds of books. When you're reading a book that has stories from many different angles, and you've got, you know, all these different characters that need progression and development, there's going to be all kinds of different chapter lengths. So okay, hope everyone's doing well. Thank you for being here. I want to remind you that we have on Saturday night at 6 p.m. CST our book club discussion. We have been reading Coraline. Fantastic book. I never did watch the movie, but from what I'm told, it's pretty good. If you're curious about what went on in that book and what we have to say, definitely come by the book club, join my stream. There'll be myself and a whole bunch of others, and it'll be good. Holy book, that looks so cool. Yeah, did you put the yes, you did. Yeah, that thing is pretty awesome. I love that little unit. It's awesome. Did I say that? Did I say it's awesome? Because it's awesome. I feel like, just in case, it's awesome. Okay. Force a hydrate. That's gonna need to pee here soon. Thank you for that. Alright. Our next chapter is Renin. You only need 300 candy corn. To get that book, I assume. That'd be cool. I'm trying to remember if Rhiannon is horse or something else. Let's find out. Rhiannon watched his favorite son leave the family's ancestral cave for what might very well be the last time in Rhiannon's lifetime. He sighed heavily as he thought about the fact that it was probably also the last time he would ever see any of his offspring within his lifetime. Or wait, no. This is still wolves, because we're talking about Farrar. Okay. Rhiannon knew that Farrar would have probably never guessed that he was his father's favorite child. After all, they had constantly fought and argued over everything and anything since Farrar was old enough to even have an argument in the first place. Renan criticized Farrar for everything that he could, or should have been, done better, as long as it was within Farrar's capabilities, of course. The way Renan saw it, he just couldn't let Farrar become soft or weak like the others were. He couldn't let himself neglect the leadership capabilities that he was born with, which came to him as naturally as water flowed through a stream. Farrar was very smart. He noticed everything he saw and heard, constantly analyzing it from every possible angle and point of view. He constantly tried to understand how wolves behaved, what drove them to act, what caused them to back down. He was curious, intelligent, determined, and persistent. He was also brave, audacious, and most importantly, he was very charismatic. Rhiannon sat down, letting his feet rest a little while longer. He gave in to the increasing weariness and weakness in his body, mind, and even spirit. He was disappointed in himself for doing so, but he was too worn out to fight it. When he was younger, he would have never let such a bad situation develop into what it had become, without rebelling with every ounce of strength that he had. Or so he liked to let himself think. But the truth only he himself knew was that he was a coward. He could have rebelled during any period of time since Gira rose to power. He could have killed Gira when she started to gain followers, corrupting more and more wolves in the pack, turning them against their own families. But he didn't, because he was afraid of what Gira might do to him if he failed. He felt ashamed that his own son had more courage to act against Gira than he ever did. When Nedana became pregnant, he used that as an excuse to avoid leading the rebellion. His next excuse became the need to take care of his wolf pups. The truth was that he was too afraid and too exhausted to fight for a hopeless cause. There were simply too many of Gira's followers and too few of those who resisted her. Everyone always thought of him as a brave and strong hunter. But deep down, regardless of what everyone thought, he was too far from being brave or strong. A moment in the trees to the north caught his attention and disrupted his train of thought. He wasn't sure if it was a wolf, or if there was more than one of them. He pretended not to notice, so that whatever or whoever moved among the trees wouldn't act more carefully than they already did. His first thought was that they might be following Farrar and the others, and so he waited. He could sense that there was something moving around the perimeter of the clearing. Right in front of him, shapes were moving headed east. If he saw that much movement, there must be more than 3 or 4, which meant that Gira had finally sent her cronies to punish them. Rhiannon slowly rose to his feet, turned around, and walked into the cave. And that's his little chapter. The father of Farrar. So there you go. Tiny little bit of background on Daddy Wolf. That sounded weird after I said that. Father wolf? That's better. Get your head out of the gutter, guys. Okay? Don't be weird. Okay? Right. Our next chapter, a little bit longer than 3 pages, is from Loran's perspective. So, before I read this, what's interesting about this book...
Wow.
Wow, indeed. Wow. What's interesting about this book and how it's written is how much time is spent per type of animal and their tribe. So in the beginning, we spent quite a bit of time with the horse tribe and, what they were up to. We spent a little bit of time with the lions. A little bit of time with the boars. But now we're spending a good, large chunk with the wolves. So, I don't know if that's because there is going to be something happening either by the end of this book or at the beginning of the next book where wolves and horses are kind of like this dominant force. I'm not sure. So, just got me thinking, because I'm just noticing how much time we were spending with wolves. So, that's all. Think amongst yourselves. Alright, we're on page 214. And again, I'll just post the link in here. This is the link to the book. And Aranel, while we're at it, if you wouldn't mind doing some shout-outs for me, we have some people in here that I would like to make sure everyone knows about. Stunt Mama is a horror game streamer and just a downright lovely person. Her husband, Stunt Papa, is one of her mods. He's a great guy. We've chatted quite a bit, off stream, and become really fond of these folks. Aranel, tier 1 for 3 months? Seriously? Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Heart. So, thank you for that. Now get back to work. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, if you could do a shout out for me for Stunt Mama, and I will do a shout out for you so you don't have to shout yourself out. Aranel is also a reader on Twitch. Definitely worth checking out. What did I do? Hold on. I gone done something. Why is this? Okay, I don't know. I don't know what's happening. I have no control. And I think it's glitched. So that's cool. Okay. So yeah, Aranel is another reader. And then we have Stunt Mama. I don't know where you went, Aranel. Oh, there you are. Could you do a shout out for Stunt Mama too? And could you also do a shout out for Gemma15, who is quietly lurking in the background? Glitches, yay, I know. Glitches are great. While you're getting those shout outs ready, I will continue reading with our Loran chapter. I hope I'm saying these names right, because I can't tell. But in my mind, it's Loran. L-A-R-A-N. Loran was trying to push away the strong feelings of grief and of sorrow that weighed heavily on his heart and mind. It was so hard for him to feel this way, so he decided to look at the others, trying to distract himself and possibly even to find some sort of encouragement from them. He looked at Farrar, who was always so strong and certain of himself. He then swept his gaze towards Talal and Gebar, who were both always trying to look tougher than the other one did. Thank you for those shout-outs, Aranel. Doing a great job. Keep it up. Among his siblings, they were probably the most competitive ones, constantly competing for the right to be the second most tough one among them, after Farrar, of course. He then looked at Lene, who was always so emotionally compassionate and understanding. She was always paying attention to him and trying to make sure that he was all right. Farrar slowed down to a complete stop. Loran realized that they had arrived at the first cave that they needed to stop at. They needed to stop at 14 caves altogether. At each cave that they were supposed to stop at, there were young wolves who were supposed to join them that they all knew personally since they were young cubs. In some of the caves, the parents were supposed to join them as well. Some of the young wolves in those families were friendly to Loran when they were all growing up, while the others were not. But with siblings such as he had, no one dared to actually hurt him. One time, they were only 4 months old, and an older pup picked up Kea, biting her in the shoulder till she bled from the bite. When Farrar had heard about the incident, he didn't say anything about it. The next day, that young wolf pup did not come out to play with the rest of the wolf pups. No one saw him the next day either, or the day after that. After a few days, he finally showed up again with Farrar by his side. Farrar had even made sure that he participated in all of the games so that he didn't feel left out. By then, everyone knew why that young wolf pup was missing for a few days. Farrar must have made him pay dearly for picking on Kea and making her bleed. But he made sure to show a friendly face to him after he taught him a lesson. All of the other wolf pups respected Farrar even more for that. Most importantly, none of them dared to pick on any of Farrar's siblings ever again. What surprised everyone even more was that Farrar came to help any other pup who ever got picked on after that incident. From that day on, any of the other wolf pups who were being bullied started coming to Farrar to ask him for protection against the wolf pups that bullied them. They received it too. When Farrar was around, no one picked on the weak. Loran knew that this history between Farrar and the other young wolves would help Farrar's image as a leader throughout the upcoming rebellion. Loran wondered how many of those young wolves were still alive, and how many of them had ended up joining Gira in order to survive or feel strong and have power over the weak. So many of the pack's young wolves had starved to death this winter. Each and every wolf that joined the rebellion would make a big difference in their chances to succeed in overthrowing Gira and her cronies from terrorizing the pack. He hoped that the young wolves remembered Farrar's behavior as well as he did. It would make their recruitment today a lot easier. Loran was glad to have more wolves join the rebellion. He was really looking forward to having wolves that were not part of their family join them. He always liked playing with other wolves as a pup. Even now, Loran has maintained his fondness for socializing and making new friends. "Loran!" Lene called out to him, disrupting his chain of thought. Even though she spoke softly, the sound could be heard through the still and quiet forest. He looked at Lene, nodding back to her. I'm getting all kinds of tongue-tied tonight. Farrar, Gebar, and Talal were all checking the perimeter together. Once they were done, they slowly walked towards the cave, looking in every direction at once. Lene was scanning the trees behind Loran to see if they were being followed. Loran looked around too, trying to show Lene that he was keeping his edge and his focus on what they had come here to do. After a short while, Farrar came back with 4 young wolves. Farrar introduced them when they joined Loran and Lene. "Loran, Lene, meet Kaja, Noma, Boto, and Gadaro." 3 of them, Kaja, Noma, and Boto, looked scared and uncertain of themselves. Gadaro looked more confident, his back straight, his head held high. "Let's go. We have more caves to visit before nightfall," Farrar said. "We move in a single file. Stay a few strides away from each other, no less than 3, and no more than 5 strides apart. Talal and Gabar, you take the rear. Gadaro, you and your siblings take the center. Keep an eye out for anything that moves through the trees. Kira's scouts could be anywhere. Lene and Loran, you stay behind me. If we're attacked, form a circle with everyone facing the outside of the circle and keeping the circle tight." With that, Farrar started walking to the next cave in a quick trot, scanning the area in front of him. After a few hundred strides, they reached the second cave. Farrar went ahead with Talal and Gabar. He left the rest of them out. He left the rest of them on the lookout with Lene in charge while he was gone. Again, they checked the perimeter of the cave before entering. A short while later, they came out with 2 full-grown wolves with them. Behind them, 2 more young and scrawny wolves came out too. When they reached them, the father introduced himself. "My name is Kata. This is my wife Runa. These are our kids, Laban, Raytan, and... He tried to speak, but he just wasn't able to. He started to sob uncontrollably as he sat down on the ground, his wife Runa trying to comfort him. She licked his face and caressed his head with her neck and cheeks as she silently hummed a comforting tune. After a few moments of awkward silence, one of Keta's children said, "I am Laban. This is my brother Ritan. The rest of our family starved to death." They all stood there silently, as Keta kept crying while his wife Runa tried to comfort him. After a few moments, he got up. He nodded to Farrar, who immediately completed the introductions. "Keta, you and your family stay behind Gadaro and his siblings. Talal and Gabar will take the rear. Lene and Loran will be at the front with me. If we're attacked, form a circle and keep it tight. If you see a gap in the circle, protect it. Now, let's go." With that, Farrar started moving at a slow pace. He kept on looking back to see how Keta and his family were doing every few dozen strides. Runa kept her eyes on Keta, who still looked like he was struggling to keep himself together. After a while, they reached the third cave. So, they're bringing all these wolves with them. Surely that's going to go noticed. I mean, if there are scouts, just randomly about, there's no way that they can grab, like, 1 or 2 wolves, let's say 2 wolves as a medium from 14 caves. That's 28 wolves, plus the rest of them. I mean, they're practically a herd at this point. That's not going to go unnoticed. Just saying. Let's see what happens. Farrar left everyone in a circle facing outwards with Lene in charge before he left with Talal and Gabar to scan the perimeter. An army, yes, exactly. A wolf army. That's my wolf impression. After checking the perimeter, they entered the cave. Loran sat there looking at the forest around him, enjoying the silence. He hadn't been to this part of the forest in a while, probably since last summer. A large gray wolf appeared out of the trees, then another one, a few strides away from him to his left. Another one appeared to his right. More and more wolves appeared, forming a line in front of the trees. Loran counted 10 of them altogether. All of them were fully grown, and they looked dangerous. Okay, maybe I called it, I don't know. The large gray wolf, who was the first one to appear out of the trees, took a few steps forward. "Where's Farrar?" he demanded. No one answered him. "Form a line," Hold the line no matter how hard you need to fight, Lene yelled as loud as she could. Or that was Lene, sorry. I used a guy's voice, but that was Lene. They all quickly formed a line facing Gyr's followers. Keita turned around and ran off into the trees. That was crappy of him. His wife, Runa, was struggling with the decision of whether or not to stay with her sons or go after him. She ended up staying. Gyr's followers laughed hysterically as he ran off, yelling insults towards Keita as he ran away. The large grey wolf who asked the question laughed the loudest. Anyone else want to run away and hide before it's too late? Where's Farrar? Tell us where he is, and we might let you live. I'll even throw in a nice piece of meat for your efforts. Lene, Laran, and Runa growled loudly, baring their teeth. Laran was looking left and right to see the others' reactions. Seeing Lene, Laran, and Runa act defensively, the others started to growl, baring their teeth as well. The wolf who led the others motioned to them. They spread out to surround them. As they did, Lene yelled, "Form a circle. Hold together. Hold the circle." And that is the end of that chapter. Oh boy. So I basically called it. I literally had not looked at the next page, but everything I was thinking in my head came to be. Or at least it's starting. So that's not a shock. Alright, we got just under 5 minutes. This next chapter is from Lene's perspective, and it's, what page are we on, 221? It's only 5 pages, so we'll do this, then we'll do Stream Raiders, and then we'll see how we're feeling after that. Lene was growling ferociously, baring her teeth threateningly at the wolves that were spreading out to surround them. Deep inside, she was scared to death. She knew that the odds were stacked up against them. These wolves were going to tear them to pieces within a few moments. When Gyr's cronies surrounded them completely, their leader spoke again. "I'm going to ask one last time before it's too late." A large brown wolf crashed into his side, propelling them both into a roll. The wolf who appeared out of nowhere had his teeth deep into the large grey wolf's neck as they rolled onto the ground. I wonder who this is. Within a few heartbeats, the large grey wolf lay dead on the ground. Her father got up and stood over the grey wolf's body. He growled at the other wolves, baring his teeth at them, his mouth and chin covered in blood. Lene quickly stepped forward, standing behind her father, protecting his back, growling and snarling at Gyr's followers, who stood in complete shock. Laran charged forward, crashing into a large brown wolf, biting him in the face. "Get him! Get him!" Godaro, Runa, and the rest all charged in after Laran, joining the fight. From the corner of her right eye, she saw a large brown wolf charge at her. Lene ducked to avoid the brown wolf's open jaws from biting her in the head. The large brown wolf knocked into her. She was pushed back and lost her balance. As Lene tried to regain her balance, another grey wolf crashed into her left side, pinning her down to the ground. On her right side, biting down hard on her left shoulder. She yelled out in pain as sharp teeth tore through her fur. She tried to get up. Lene tried to get out of the grey wolf's grip, but she couldn't shake the grey wolf off. She howled in pain as sharp teeth sank deeper into her shoulder. Something crashed into the grey wolf that was pinning her down. Lene got up to see her mother was wrestling with the grey wolf that was pinning her down only a few heartbeats ago. The first brown wolf that attacked her was now attacking her mother from her right side, biting deep into her mother's neck, pulling his teeth from side to side. Blood gushed out of her mother's neck. Her mother fell to the ground, thrashing from side to side as blood sprayed out of her neck. Lovely. The brown wolf turned around, coming at her in full force. She jumped to the left as the brown wolf lunged at her. Lene immediately turned to the right, sinking her teeth into the lower part of the brown wolf's right leg, or back right leg. She quickly let go of her bite on his back right leg. She moved back just as the grey wolf tried to tackle her from the left side and ended up missing her completely. The grey wolf turned towards her, facing her with the brown wolf that she bit in the leg standing beside him. The brown wolf she bit in the leg was to her left. The grey wolf was standing to her right. The brown wolf that she bit in the leg was leaning on his left side. Then Lane looked to her left. She saw her mother's body laying still on the ground with a pool of blood pouring from her neck, which was torn open by the large brown wolf. Lene attacked them with a rage she never thought she could ever possess. She charged at the grey wolf on her right, who stepped back, trying to move away from her ferocious attack. Lene circled the grey wolf from the right, placing the grey wolf between herself and the large brown wolf. She ran straight into the grey wolf, making them both crash into the large brown wolf, who couldn't move fast enough to get away because of his limp. The large brown wolf howled in pain as he tried to get out from beneath Lene and the grey wolf. Lene bit the grey wolf in the neck, let go, then stepped back immediately. She didn't want to focus too much on one of them, while the other one attacked her from behind or from the side, without her being able to defend herself. The grey wolf recovered from the bite to the neck and charged at her. Lene rolled to her left. The grey wolf ran past her to the right. As she was turning around, the brown wolf caught her by the back leg with its teeth. The bite sank into the top part of her leg, and she yelled out in pain. Lene turned her head around, biting the brown wolf in the neck, sinking her jaws deep into his upper neck and drawing blood as her teeth penetrated fur. The brown wolf let go of her leg, trying to run away, but Lene didn't let go. Her teeth were sinking into his neck. She tasted blood gushing out. The brown wolf ran as fast as it could, desperately trying to shake her off, but Lene held on to his neck with her teeth, as her lower body was being dragged on the ground. Blood was gushing out from the brown wolf's neck and onto her head. Lene let go and rolled to her right. The brown wolf kept running away from her with blood gushing out of its neck. She got up after she recovered from the roll and turned left to face the grey wolf. She turned just as the grey wolf crashed into her, knocking both of them onto the ground. Lene bit the grey wolf in the lower part of the neck just as he fell over, pinning her down. The grey wolf tried to pull its head out of Lene's jaws, but she bit harder, shaking her head from side to side as she tried to pull away. When she felt the grey wolf pull his head back harder, Lene let go, rolled to the left, and charged at him as he was trying to regain his balance. The grey wolf regained his balance just as Lene crashed into him, pinning him down. The grey wolf tried to bite her in the head, but she was closing in. But Lene moved her head back, his jaws barely missing her nose. She lunged forward, biting the grey wolf in the face. He tried to bite her in the throat as she sunk her teeth deeper into his face. Lene let go, rolled to the right, and turned left towards the grey wolf that was getting up. Loran suddenly appeared from the grey wolf's right side with a look of rage in his eyes. He crashed into the grey wolf, pinning him down. Loran was biting into his neck with an intense fury, growling in a loud voice as he tore through his fur with his sharp teeth. The grey wolf moved his head from side to side slower and slower as blood gushed out from his neck. Finally, he stopped moving completely. Lene looked around and saw that Runa and the other one of her sons, Laban, were still standing. Her other son, Ritan, lay still on the ground, his fur matted with blood in several different places. Gadara was standing a little to the side, staring in shock at the bodies of Noma, Boto, and Keja, who all lay dead on the ground. On the other side, Farrar, Tilal, and Gabar were all staring in shock at their father's body. He was laying on the ground, and he wasn't moving. So there it is. The intense fight of the scouts, victorious, but without many casualties. Okay. 24 allies. Good job, folks. This should be pretty straightforward. We're going to be pinned in here for a little while before we can move, so I think we'll curse right here. Alright. Good luck. Everyone's trying to break through the doors. We've got some extra allies on our side, so that's great. A heavy cost indeed, Aranel, a heavy cost indeed. And to think that some of those that died amongst the good guys, if you will, were just so young. You know, they probably didn't stand much of a chance at all. Which is unfortunate, to say the least. I have a curious question, though, of the different stories that we've read so far. We've got, you know, the horses and, you know, what they're going through. We've got the lions and what they, you know, a little bit of their story. Obviously the wolves and the boars. I am curious, based on what we know so far, which animal tribe you're all most connected to. Who are you, you know, enjoying more listening to? Are you connecting more with the horses? Is it the wolves? So on and so forth. I am quite curious. Alright, good job. 25 gold goes to Aranel again. Look at you soaking up all that gold. Good job, 13th with 41 kills and 6 assists. That is absolutely fantastic. Good job. I think that'll be it for Stream Raiders tonight, and we'll continue on Sunday. But we still have more reading to do. We are on page 226. So I think what we're going to do is we'll read this next little snippet because it's only like 3 pages. That gets us to 228. Then the next part goes from 228 to 253. So I think that'll be a good starting place for Sunday. So we'll read just a few more pages from Aran's perspective. And again, it's a short one. It's literally 2 pages. And then after that, we're going to go back to Kubatar. So that's a good breaking point between the wolves and going back to the horses. And Aranel and 13th Age are both connecting more with the wolves. You know, and I'm not surprised. Based on how this book has been written and how the characters have been developed, that doesn't surprise me at all. There's much more empatheticness, sympathy-based writing when it comes to the wolves, whereas the horses, it's more military style, kinda. So, yeah, I'm not surprised by that at all. So, let's read these couple pages. We'll end it there, and then Goldie, hey, how you doing? The horses, but I've just been around to hear most of their story. Atkinson wants to remain neutral. No, I think I connect with the wolves too. I mean, I get what is happening with the horses, and I understand that more of it, but my military experience is so small compared to a normal, you know, lifestyle. Aranel, thank you so much for gifting a sub to Goldie. That is so kind of you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Very kind of you. Thank you so much. Goldie, you now have access to the emotes. No more ads for you either. And when we do our next subs only Discord reading, you can join that too. So, welcome in as a sub. Thank you, Aranel. It's very kind of you. Thank you so much. Alright, let's read these 2 pages, and then we'll find someone to raid, and then we'll jump into page 228 with Kubitar on Sunday. And for you specifically, Goldie, because we're going to read your book next, we're about 100 after we will be done tonight. We'll be 100 pages away from finishing this book. So that tells me that we basically have 1 more week. So we'll read Sunday. We might actually finish it on Thursday. At least that's going to be my hope. And then the next following Sunday, we will start your book. So there you go. I know you were looking for a timeline. That is approximately the timeline. So stay tuned. Start advertising if you want to. But that's kind of where we're at. So, all right. Here we go. So this is from Aran's perspective. Aran woke to the sun shining on his face. He looked around, noticing that he was all alone. He got up and slowly walked over to the small hill to the south to see if he saw anyone. He crawled on the edge of the small hill and saw a large group of bison, hundreds of strides away from him. There were dozens of them, with hundreds more behind them. He didn't know if they could reach his location, but he didn't want to wait around to find out. Laying low on his stomach, he slowly crawled back until he was out of their sight. He started walking northeast for a few hundred strides until he went over another low hill. He quickened his pace and looked back every now and then to see if he was being followed. After covering a few hundred strides, he turned east, hoping to find something he could hunt. His spirits were still extremely low. He wasn't too optimistic about his chances to survive. Every now and then he stopped to rest and to think about a plan to hunt bison or a horse that might work. But he couldn't think of a good one, no matter how much he tried to. He kept looking for another 2,000 or 3,000 strides before turning southeast. He was so hungry and so tired, but he slowly kept on moving throughout the day. He was all alone, just as he wanted to be. He was all alone, just as he wanted to be when he left the Pride. But he didn't think it would be like this. He didn't think that he would feel so hopeless and so lonely out here on the open plains. After covering a good few thousands of strides, he sat down when he didn't have the energy to walk anymore. Eventually, the sun set to the west. He got up and started walking southeast, hoping that he would see some sign of life. He had to, if he wanted to find something to hunt, if he didn't want to die from starvation. After a while, he walked over a hill. He spotted a small lake hundreds of strides to the east. Seeing the clear and inviting waters reminded him of how thirsty he actually was, since he hadn't had any water all day. He slowly walked towards the lake, carefully looking from side to side. When he reached the water, he saw a large shape laying on the ground a few dozen strides away. He froze. He looked at it for a few heartbeats, trying to figure out what it was, but it wasn't moving. Aran started walking towards it, ready to run away or fight for his life if it attacked. The problem was, he wasn't sure if he could outrun anything, or even defend himself in his current state of physical exhaustion, weakness, and low morale. When he reached the shape on the ground and saw that it was a dead horse, Aran sank his teeth into it in less than a heartbeat. So yeah, that's the 2 pages. So Aran was the lion that basically, in a similar situation to the wolves where they weren't allowed to go hunting. Not to say he was a lone wolf, because he's a lion, so he's a lone lion. So there you go. thank you, everyone, for sticking around for this read. We got through a lot today, so that was pretty cool. We went from page 171 to 228, so that was a good read. And why did that sound not come through? Strange. It should have. Oh, it thinks I'm offline. I am not. I am not offline. That's weird. That's really weird. I think it's broken. Sorry. That's bizarre. I have this whole chatbot thing where I have my sound set up, and it's supposed to just be on all the time, but for some reason it doesn't know that I'm online. I wonder if it was because of all the silent clap instead. You could do the what is it, the poetry thing where they snap. There you go. I'm gonna have to figure that out because I'm definitely online. I sure am. But it doesn't even let me start it. Like, it should have just started itself, basically. So, yeah. I'll have to look at that later. But for now, let me go see who is online that we can go say hello to. Ah, perfect. I know just the person to go say hello to. Just the person. Gentle Fox ASMR. I'm a big fan of what he does. He's excellent with ASMR based sounds, and he's currently reading The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. So he's been at it for about an hour, so he's still going to be streaming. So let's go say hello to him. Yeah, I think that'll work. Thank you again for hanging out with me. Thank you for those subscriptions, Aranel. I cannot tell you how much that means to me. I love that you're all in here, sticking it out, enjoying the story with me. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Let's go and raid Gentle Fox and see what he's up to. Thank you for reading. Good night, folks. Absolutely 13th. And I can't wait to see you all again on Sunday. So until then, be kind, be respectful, and love yourself as you love others. Good night.